Hang on, I'm gonna be right back. I have a cat stuck in here and he's gonna start complaining. Come on, buddy. You're too big. You can't be in here. Oh, don't hide.
Welcome to Creativity, the podcast where art and engineering collide. On this podcast, we talk about all kinds of stuff from art to engineering to everything in between. Today, we're talking about a subject that some of you may know a lot about, some of you may not know anything about, which is CNC machining. And we've got a very special guest today named Winston Moy. How are you doing today, Winston?
I'm doing really fine. It's an early Saturday morning for me, but I'm looking forward to this. This should be a good start to my weekend.
Yeah, well, hopefully that'll be the case. Winston basically he did a YouTube channel where he talked about the Shapeoko CNC machine, and basically it was so good that Carbide 3D picked him up and decided he should work for them directly. Is that an accurate assessment of your experience in life?
It's a little bit of a oversimplification because that process took several years. But that's kind of how it went down. When I first got started with CNC, the environment, the market was all different. It was kind of like the early days of 3D printing, where you can buy different kits and put them together. And people.
Sure. And what year is this? Just
this
so we get a little
is
reference.
about 2013.
Okay.
I believe. So when I was doing my shopping, I was finishing up grad school. I was looking for a hobby, and I just did a Google search for desktop CNC kits, and some sites had here are the top 10, whatever. There were some small ones, there were some large expensive ones, and the Shapeoko 2 at that time sort of hit that bill as that sweet spot, like under $1,000, looked like it had a decent work area, and so I pre-ordered one, and as it turns out, I was in the first batch of people who got their machines. I think it was the first 250 or something. And so that meant that when I did an unboxing video, I was the first one out there. And that kind of gave me the momentum I needed to just keep making projects. Because people were all looking hey, this new kit that just came out, is it any good? What can you make with it? So I got lucky there.
Sure.
Sure.
Well,
kept playing with it.
I think we might have gotten lucky.
What's that, Matt?
I think we might have gotten lucky.
That's right. We got lucky to have such good content to watch, right? Is that what you're saying?
It is. It is. Winston's doing a fantastic job.
Well, thank you.
if we can just take a step back here for people, I say CNC machining, I guess first of all, what a Shapeoko is a CNC router, and if you're taking that even a step further, a router is basically something like a to simplify it, terribly simplified. It's like a drill that you drill down and then it goes horizontally, and you can cut out squares and shapes and whatever else, and then you get a computer could control this, and you can cut basically anything you want. I mean, it's pretty amazing. Just thought I'd put that out for people who
there's no idea. A lot of ways we can simplify this. Like a CNC is CNC. When I say CNC, I mean CNC router, but CNC can be generalized to a laser or a printer. CNC basically just means it's a robot that'll move where you want it to go. And you can either use that to inject material like molten plastic, or move a cutting tool like a end mill.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. And basically you go through what's called CAM software, computer-aided machining or manufacturing, I believe.
Manufacturing, I think.
Yeah, and then it gives you something called G code, which sends it to a computer or whatever controller you're using, and it literally says go from point A to point B. But this point A to point B could be 1,000 little steps. And one question I had for you, Winston, you see G code all the time, and you see it written all kinds of different ways. What would you say is the proper way to spell G code, capitalization wise?
I normally, when I'm typing it out, it's on social media, so it's kind of informal and lax. So I'll just do all lowercase. Okay. If I'm typing this out, in a sentence, for my blog or something, I might capitalize the G,
okay.
But usually I don't really care.
Okay, I used to see it written all different ways, and that's general code, right? Winston, is that what that stands for?
I don't actually know.
Oh, okay.
Well, Jeremy, you've got me wondering what. Yeah, I write G code in my blog all the time, and I don't even know what my editor corrects it to.
It's
And she
I
must.
maybe it's transcended an acronym at this point. It's just a thing, I guess.
Now I'm going to be wondering about this the whole rest of the episode.
Well, my understanding is it stands for General Code, and it's something that goes way back to when CNC was, I guess, a little more exotic than it is even now, I guess.
I mean, it's kind of just at the fundamental level, it's a programming language. It's not too dissimilar from Fortran. Just basic instructions, some really simple arguments, and you string them together, and it does something far more complex than the sum of its parts.
Sure. And yeah, CNC router, basically, traditionally you'd say it's got some sort of carriage on it, which is something that just moves the router around. It's got a couple steppers that go left and right, up and down, and it's able to create whatever you want, and it's pretty neat. So
yeah,
Pat, I know you.
There's another variation on that. You could move the workpiece instead of the router. But at the end of the day, it's just the cutting tool is moving relative to the thing being cut.
So one question on that, though, when you move the workpiece with respect to the cutting head, is that where does that become a milling machine at that point? Because I've always wondered about that too, what the distinction between a milling machine and a router is.
That's kind of like the general consensus. Like CNC router being a gantry style, you have like the moving x-axis with the long Y rails, but and then CNC milling machine would be maybe when you start to think of a Tormach. But functionally, like under the hood, the way the software treats it, it's all pretty much the same.
Okay, that's neat. Now, Pat, I know you had some more specifics for Winston you wanted to ask to get into.
Oh well,
maybe not.
I wanted to. I wish I could say that Winston is the reason I chose the Shapeoko over the X card, because they were the two machines I was looking at when I needed a machine carbon fiber at home, and I needed some. And I saw the picture of, I'm sure you've seen it, Winston, of the X-Carve rails that fit inside the Shapeoko rails. And the prices, I don't even remember which one. I think there was the smaller machines, the Shapeoko was cheaper, and then the bigger machines, the X. I don't remember which way that went. But I said, oh, look at the size of those rails. They're almost the same price. I'm going to get the Shapeoko. And then the day I ordered it, I started watching your videos, Winston. I probably watched every video in the couple of weeks it took for the Shapeoko to show up. It was fantastic.
Well, then it probably you probably hit the ground running then.
Oh yeah, I was cutting almost immediately. It was so easy.
Nice. So Winston, what is the coolest thing you made with your machine, with your CNC machine?
That's a really tough question to answer, because there's something I really like about each thing I make, unless it's a throwaway project. But usually the way I approach projects is if there's not some new element to it or some twist that I'm putting on an old project, it's not really fun for me. So I'm always trying to take on projects where there's something I don't quite know, or there's a new way that I want to try to make something. So it's hard to say which one resonates with me the most. There are some really memorable ones. From sort of an artistic standpoint, I really like the lightsaber hilt that I made out of wood, which was a collab with David Johnson of DIY Engineering. He did a lot of fun electrical stuff with that to hook it up to a servo, put some LEDs on it, and turn it into a beer tap.
Very cool.
But I think for me, the most enjoyable project I did was a little camp knife that I made on the Nomad, which is a small self-contained desktop CNC, smaller than a Shapeoko, but a little more accurate, a little more rigid because it uses lead screws. And that project for me was fun because it forced me to touch on a lot of different areas sort of in the maker world. You've got machining the metals, like the steels. I used an O1 tool steel. So that was a new experience for me. Just you have to go really slow, really shallow. It's a much tougher material to machine than aluminum. Then there was also the fact that you have to heat treat this metal to give it the strength and toughness needed to be a knife. And again, that's a completely new experience. Bladesmiths have been doing it for ages, but for me, it was totally new. So I was like kind of freaking out, throwing this thing under the fire and then quenching it in oil and hoping it would be hard enough to hold an edge. There's machining composites.
Sure. So an O1, is that oil impregnated? Is that correct?
It is an oil quenching tool steel.
Okay.
It's pretty. I don't want to say middle of the road, but it's a very common one. Starrett has its own similar blend. It's a fairly common one, and it's fairly forgiving because it's an oil quench. There are also like air quenching steels and other things like that. But like O1, middle of the road.
And what you mean, you basically heat this up, you heat treat it, and then you actually quench it in oil to make it
to temper or to harden the blade.
okay.
So the way that process works is you need to heat the metal to a critical point where the grain structure starts to dissolve, and then you quench it in oil to quickly bring down the temperature and lock in a certain structure as the metal cools down.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I remember
when the steel arrives, it's soft enough to be machinable. But then when you're done
Barely
heat treating
soft
it,
enough.
yeah. And then when you quench it, when you heat treat it and quench it, you would not want to machine it.
You would not want to machine it on a hobby CNC.
Yes.
But there are people who do actually prefer, it's called hard machining, when you machine it in the hardened state. Because it's harder, a little more brittle, you can actually shave off cleaner flakes of material in some cases. And then also, you're removing a lot of any scale or any oxidation on the surface. There are pros and cons, but unless you have a nice strong machine and the high quality tooling needed to do it, it's best to machine it when it's softened.
So when you talk about hard machining, are you talking about like an EDM, electronic discharge machining process, or like grinding, or are you talking about actual spinning machines like you would?
You can actually mechanically remove material
Wow.
from a heat treated blade, but it's not as common.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not. That's yeah, it's funny. It's something, I know you've got a mechanical engineering degree. I guess that's what you went to grad school too for. I would
It
assume
was aerospace, so
aerospace.
related, but that was maybe not the best decision I had. It was more of I thought aerospace was cool, so I wanted to try it out. And I ended up picking a concentration within aerospace that was very similar to mechanical, just because
Mm,
I didn't
yeah.
have the full background, the computational fluid dynamics and thermodynamics needed to pull it off in a different track.
Okay. Well, no, it's just interesting talking to you because I have a mechanical engineering degree myself, and it seems like, how can I put this? I feel like I'm just kind of all over the place and stuff that I like to learn as far as electronics and whatever else. But it seems like you've really been able to dive in and, you talk about the O1 tool steel, you talk about machining, heat treatment, et cetera, et cetera. It seems like you've been able to, I guess, concentrate your efforts and become very much an expert at one field. Has that been hard for you to kind of narrow down like that? Or maybe I'm not even saying this correctly.
I actually think CNC has broadened my education.
Okay.
Because the way I always see it is, it took me a while to see it this way, but for me, CNC has been a Trojan horse for different fields and different just pools of knowledge. Like, I wouldn't have immersed myself in the whole bladesmithing world if I didn't have a CNC, because I don't have a forge at home. Like, I'm not gonna, like, I don't have a welder. The metalworking stuff kind of scared me, and this
Yeah.
gave me an excuse to sort of dip my toes in that world. And there's a lot of other little things that CNC will reinforce from my education that I would otherwise have forgotten. So, like, for example, just like a really basic thing, if you're machining something, the thinner you machine it, the more strain will move it around. So if you're machining something really thin, like some ornamental silver, like, you need to really secure it. You've got to work hold it. You've got to support it. and that's a strength of materials thing. That's a statics thing, and maybe if I'm designing something in Fusion, I have to consider how strong is this going to be when I machine it. Is it going to meet my applications? So learning the theory in school is one thing, and you'll probably forget it after you leave school. But when you have a CNC and you're designing your own things, you are pushing material around, shaving it, seeing how it breaks. It reinforces aspects of your education that if you were working a desk job, you would probably just forget. And so that's why I've really been enjoying CNC, because it gives me an excuse to really dig in and absorb or reinforce the knowledge I had before.
Sure. And how long have you been, I guess, full time doing what you do? As far as, were you full time YouTube before you went to Carbide 3D, or were you?
No. Back in those days, with a couple thousand subscribers, there was no way to make that sustainable. And even now, I don't think I can make the jump to full time YouTube without another year or two of really grinding at it.
Right.
When I got my Shapeoko 2, I had just left grad school. I was working for the Navy as a civilian, doing support equipment for UAVs. Support equipment being all the tools and ancillary equipment that you need to keep a plane flying that's not the plane itself. So like if you go to the airport, the tugs, the maintenance equipment, all that stuff that goes on to keep a plane flying is the kind of stuff that I worked on.
Sure.
And it's cool that it's with planes, but it's also not so glamorous because it doesn't fly. So it was a decent job, but it didn't really excite me in any ways. So I would go home and I would just draw something up in SolidWorks or Fusion and start machining in my garage and tinkering. And that's what was scratching the creative itch, not really the day job.
So I've wondered about that. Jobs. I remember I had a job with a, nominally they were a race car company, but we were making radiators, and it was, it was kind of, anyway, I don't want to say too much bad about them, but it wasn't the best job I've ever had. I'll just put it that way. But then, I worked for some other places that maybe would have seemed a little bit more boring, but you're working more in the process automation, you're working on the robotics, et cetera, et cetera. And it's, I don't know. I guess just somebody like you, you wanted a job that it just sounds so cool, but I guess you end up working on kind of a tiny little part of something. Is that
So
kind of?
the way I've always described it to people is that you are so far removed from the reward cycle of a project. Because
Right.
of the size of the government and the Department of Defense, you can work on something, you can get it ready to ship, and it goes out the door, and you don't get any feedback for like 6 to 8 months. So like, hey, we made this product, it's going out in the field, and it disappears from your life. And then a little while later, they come back and they'll say, hey, there are these things that need to be changed. Make a revision to it. But you're just like, when I make a YouTube video, I put it out and I immediately get comments. Hey, good job on this. You could try doing this. I learn, I engage, and the cycle is almost instantaneous. But when you're working for the government, it just like projects take so long that by the time you hear about them again, you've already lost interest.
Yep.
Or you're already working on the next thing, and you've got to change gears like in your headspace and go back to the old project. So it's just it doesn't really work for someone who's looking for instant gratification.
Sure.
I've worked for companies with, tens of thousands of employees, thousands of employees, and just, 100 or 50 employees. And the smaller the company is, the more fun I have. It doesn't even matter what we're doing at the company. It's just, it's a nicer experience with smaller, when you're a bigger percentage of what's going on in a 50-person company than a 50,000 person, or the government, of course. That's even bigger.
The caveat to that is that oftentimes you have specialists in very specific areas in a bigger company that you can rely on.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, for example, right now working for Carbide, if I have a design question, there aren't as many people I can bounce an idea off of. And so I have to rely more on myself, more on my intuition, a little bit of that education to decide whether or not this design should move forward.
And when anything goes wrong, you have to own it. You don't have
Yeah.
anybody to push up the chain at, or yeah, there's
That was one of the biggest hurdles I had to overcome when we were designing the Nomad. Um, there were parts of that machine that I had to design and send out drawings to manufacture. And normally, when you send out a drawing, there are people who will review the drawings and people who will approve the drawings. And there's so many layers of accountability that you can hide behind.
yep.
Because in the government, there's always someone more
that guy.
senior than me who's looking at it and saying, "Oh, just fix this before you send out the drawing." Working for Carbide, there is no higher person. Like, it's just, this is your design. If there's something wrong, it's your fault.
Even not having somebody above it, even having other people side by side with you to look at your stuff is nice too. If you get small, like you're saying, if you're small enough, you don't even have the peers to always, at least not always, to look over your stuff and make sure you're not doing some boneheaded move. I do boneheaded moves all the time.
That's actually why we brought Pat on as with the co-host of the show, so I'd have somebody to
Yeah, somebody has to
blame.
make the mistakes.
No, it's about seriously, how big of a company is Carbide, the company you work for?
I would say a less than 100, more than more than a couple dozen. I don't have exact numbers because I've only seen half the company because we're split up from between the California HQ and we have a shop in Illinois that's kind of like Shapeoko HQ.
Okay. And I guess another thing, I mean, you came into them came into Carbide as a quote content creator. I guess it would be the word for what you did. But you say you were designing the Nomad. So when did apparently your duties switched at some point in the?
It's not that they switched. It's just that they were never fully defined. When we had the discussion about bringing me on, they initially thought I could do about 2/3 video and maybe 1/3 random R&D prototyping design kind of stuff. The structure of Carbide is it's the opposite of top heavy, like where we have like one guy who does he's basically the father of the Shapeoko, Edward Ford, over in Illinois. We've got Rob, who's our CEO, and he does a lot of the mechanical design.
Edward sent me a hat.
It's a good hat. So it's only like one or two people who really are sort of the technical warrants or the keepers of a particular machine design. So we don't have like big teams of engineers working on a product. It's a small handful of people. And so when we're designing a machine like the new Nomad 3 or the Shapeoko Pro, we don't really have a lot of bandwidth for doing other things. Like, hey, can you do a test in aluminum with this new cutter, or just even test this new machine? Because the majority of our staff are people who are building the machines, who are doing support, who are basically just doing the day-to-day operations. So I kind of am like the lead of the testing team / the only member of the testing team. So yeah, there's not a lot of bandwidth, and I was sort of there to fill in all the gaps between the high level, between the low level, of everything that goes on. So I could do a little bit of support, the video stuff for sure, but also all of the testing, a little bit of development where my bosses don't have the time to do that.
So you must stay very busy then, I assume.
Yeah, it ebbs and flows. Pre-pandemic, before we really got into doing the Nomad 3, it was more just video. And then once the pandemic hit and we were like, all right, we're shifting gears, we're going to get out this product, or at least start doing a lot of the design and iteration while like we're all stuck at home, then I started getting more involved.
Okay.
The way that worked, which I want to make a video on at some point, was Rob basically designed the structure of the machine, everything mechanical under the enclosure. And then at some point, he just handed me the entire model and said, enclose this machine but keep the DNA, make it look similar to the old Nomad.
And Rob is, I guess, one of your designers, or he's
He's the CEO. He's
CEO.
our programmer, and just basically, if I have a question about a mechanical design, I'll run it past him because he's the next highest up, but
he's
also
the
the highest
CEO,
up.
but he actually designed the internals of this. That's pretty.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
There's very little like I
Pure
don't want to say
management.
corporate fluff, but everyone who's there is there because they have some kind of expertise in something, something
Nice.
technical.
No, that's like the dream, to own your own company, yet, you know, actually be able to do the mechanical engineering and stuff. I feel like that's maybe not everybody's dream, but I think that's
it's Jeremy's
good.
dream for sure.
That's my dream.
But I mean, there are times where like maybe we could use a little more marketing influence or something. But for now, for the scale we're doing, I think we're doing a pretty okay job.
So you guys want to take a little coffee break, and we'll come back and discuss a few more things about this? Welcome to the coffee break, the part of the podcast where we ask you to pledge money to us. And no, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, and apparently my dog agrees. But yeah. So anyway, we're doing our coffee break now. I've got actual cold coffee.
Mine's actually water, Jeremy. I'm sorry.
Actually water. Okay. I want to give a shout out to our top 5 Patreons: Stuart Morrow, Brian Moses, Pat Regan, Positive Waves, and Stephen Booker. Thanks so much for supporting us. That's really, really awesome. Pat, if somebody did want to support us on the podcast, how would they do that?
We'll have a link in the description, but you can go to patreon.com/creativitycast.
Podcast. No, it's patreon.com/thecreativity.
Oh, it is the Creativity Podcast. All one word spelled out.
And at some point in the future, we'll get that correct the first time. But it's patreon.com/thecreativity podcast. And what's almost as good as that, I think you know the answer to this, Pat.
I do. Liking and subscribing, like the video, leaving comments. YouTube loves when you leave comments. And yeah, and even if you're on SoundCloud and you can't see our beautiful faces, that's okay too. I bet they like when you hit the like button as well.
They probably do. I haven't discussed it with Mr. SoundCloud yet, but I'm sure he would agree.
I'll send him a message. We'll find out.
All right, welcome back, guys. We've had our coffee, or had lemonade, and I don't know. We just say that pretty much, as we also say. But anyway, Winston, I did have something in his.
There was some water in there left. That didn't. That's not what I expected.
Yeah. So Winston, I mean, we've talked about your kind of experience, with Carbide, YouTube, even the Navy, etc. But you, I guess we haven't really discussed your machines that much with Carbide 3D. I mean, you've got the Shapeoko and then the Nomad. I guess, can you tell us what's the line between? I guess, why would you get one over the other? What's the deal there?
So a little bit about the history of the two of those machines is that they were developed completely independently. But like, it shows in where we're located. Illinois is sort of Shapeoko land. That's Edward Ford. And then Rob and George, and back then Apollo, were kind of the Nomad team. And those were two separate products that the people in charge started talking to each other, and they're like, hey, we should team up and work on this together. That's why there are common aspects of the machine, like the controller. So some of the electronics are shared, but they were designed with basically independently for their own separate purposes. Shapeoko was always meant to be sort of a kit you can assemble yourself that'll give you a lot of work area, use it for general purpose woodworking type things. And of course, people will take that and push it really far and do crazy cuts in aluminum or steel. And Nomad was the machine that Rob and Georgia made, because that was the machine they wished they had when they were working in the toy industry. So they would do a lot of prototyping and plastics and Ren shape and wood. And at the time, CNC wasn't an accessible technology. You had maybe a little bit of 3D printing, but if you want to make stuff out of like a variety of physical materials, you either go to a machine shop or you don't get it. Like there was no do-it-yourself option. So the Nomad was sort of their dream, like a little machine you can keep in your prototyping lab to knock out quick one-offs or even do small batch production runs. And so it had to be a self-enclosed, ready to run out of the box kind of experience. And so that's what they designed for versus the self-assembled, you have to put in a little more work, but maybe you get some more work area kind of trade-off.
So how big is the Nomad? Basically, it sounds to me like basically you get like a box and you can set it on your desk and it does this thing almost like a 3D printer.
It's about the size of a physically, it's about the size of a 3D printer.
Yeah, it's pretty similar to like my Ender 5 or something. It's between 400 to 450 millimeters in length, width, and height, I believe.
And that's the work area, or that's the...
No, that's the total size of the machine.
Total.
The work area is 8 by 8 by 3 inches, which sort of goes back to the name of the predecessor of the Nomad 3, the Nomad 883 Pro.
Okay, well that's...
where Shapeoko starts at like 16 by 16 inches and goes upwards of like 31 or 33 inches.
Right. Well, that's pretty big machine. I mean, for its class, I guess, you say big, it's all relative.
For someone in their garage,
Yeah.
you wouldn't want to go too much bigger unless you had like a 2-bay and you want to get a 4x8 CNC router. But you can do plenty on the Shapeoko, and it's at the point where you might start having to displace other things in the garage, like a car, to get it in there.
I guess that I guess to ask you a Navy question, what's the biggest CNC you had access to in the Navy? I bet that's gigantic.
Not as gigantic as you think. Like we had the usual, like a bunch of Haas's. Near when I was leaving, we got like a 5x10 water jet that the people who had purchased did not plan for properly. And they had to, the door, basically, the double doors that they wanted to roll it through weren't wide enough. So they had to cut a hole in the wall of the shop to get it in. But yeah, it was a good amount of manufacturing, but it wasn't anything crazy.
Okay. I was thinking maybe there was like a, machine that like had a, like a, like a pilot inside that like drove it around, for, I don't know. You'd think they'd have something crazy like that somewhere. But
it sounds glamorous. You're making things for aerospace, but none of it flies. And a lot of the interesting stuff is still left to the contractor. So like we would have like equipment from Lockheed or like Northrop Grumman, and they will deal with a lot of the proprietary things that need to interface with the plane, and we're just basically managing them.
Okay. Well,
I'm particularly excited now because the only thing I make on my CNC is things that fly. That's fantastic.
You were doing more aerospace engineering than I was when I worked for the Navy.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So as far as these machines go, the both the Shapeoko and the Nomad, I guess their gantries, they're actuated by belts, correct?
The Nomad is fully lead screw. In the early iterations, I think in the Kickstarter version, it was belts. But when they, like a year or two down the road, they were like, all right, we're going to step it up. Lead screws in lengths of like 400 millimeters aren't crazy expensive, and it is a pretty big step up for a little machine like that where you're trying to be super accurate. Shapeoko has been built, but they've been steadily improving them. So the original Shapeoko shipped with 6 millimeter belts. In 2016 or 2017, they switched to 9 millimeter belts. So 50% wider, which means less stretch, a little more accurate. And then for the Shapeoko Pro, they've moved to, I believe, 15 millimeter belts, so
Hmm.
like over double what it was originally. So those belts, they really don't stretch any appreciable amount. At that point, it's kind of like a poor man's rack and pinion setup.
Yeah, I could see that. So what kind of accuracy can you expect out of what kind of Nomad versus Shapeoko? What kind of accuracies can you expect on either of those?
So officially, we say the Shapeoko is good for between 5 to 8 thou, and the Nomad is good for anywhere from 1 to 3.
Wow,
But
that's pretty good. I mean,
yeah,
for
so
something that for a hobbyist, maybe hobbyist is the wrong word, but for something that's better than I would have expected. That's pretty
yeah, so the thing is,
good.
um, the repeatability of these machines, like the resolution of the stepper motor, is better. So if there's a little bit of backlash, if there's a little bit of belt stretch or something, you can compensate for it. If you're trying to machine a hole to drop in a bearing and you want it to be a press fit, if you machine it the first time and it's, say, 5 thou undersized, you could go into Fusion or whatever you're using and make that hole 5 thou bigger. And then you run that program again,
Mm,
and then maybe at that point you're off by 1 thou. You can creep up on something to a fairly high level of resolution, even if the outright accuracy off the bat is off by that initial margin,
right.
because
So so
it'll move back to that coordinate within a thou or two, and then
okay.
you run the adjusted toolpath, and you can creep up on the exact dimension you want to hit.
Okay. So you say that. I mean, that seems impressive to me, but then you're saying you can, I guess, unofficially get quite a bit more accurate than you're even, I guess, officially claiming. Is that
Yeah, the thing is, most people, they're not going to go into Fusion. They're not going to tweak their files by a couple thou here or there. So like, when we give those claims of accuracy, that's sort of like the what we would expect the average person to get. Certainly, people will take it farther, but that's kind of on them. That's kind of if they have the know-how to tweak the original file or the G code to make those changes. So you can always get more uh, if you're. I don't want to say smart enough, because even the regular
Motivated
user
enough.
is smart enough. But if they have gained the experience to implement all these little tricks they can use to improve accuracy.
oh sure. Or if you care enough. I mean, I made something. Well, I made a box for like a fume extractor or something, and Pat made the comment. Well, you probably should have. I'm not surprised you didn't use your CNC router on this, but you probably should have at least made some comment like, "Well, if I just had an accurate thing that I could accurately make interlocking pieces with, I could, you know, be
Yeah, and it
perfect."
was a
But
fume extractor for the laser cutter, the big
yeah,
old laser cutter. So you could have cut the fume extractor with the laser cutter.
I could have, or my CNC that I have as well. But it's sometimes you use what's I don't know. I was trying to just do something quick and dirty. So I guess what I'm saying is, even if you have the experience and or the intelligence, and I'm not saying that I do necessarily, sometimes you just want to. Sometimes 10 thousandths is good enough for the job, I
Yeah,
guess.
Well, and I've
and
noticed my
honestly,
router, the end mill wiggles quite a bit.
you've got
You
some
have to,
run out.
yeah. I mean, I've crashed that thing. I mean, I do stupid things all the time. My friend who bought the 3018, he came over to cut something, and he did his first tool paths in Fusion, and we had to flip apart and stuff. And there was an extra G28 command, and I have my G28 point set up to in a particular spot, and something went stupid, and the machine it just went right to the front corner and just knocked the little 2 millimeter end mill just got smashed right off the front. It was fantastic. It was one. I mean, I do stuff like that all the time, though. I do. My trouble is I only cut something maybe once a month, and I forget a lot of things in between. And I'm forgetting a lot less now that I've had the machine for 2 years. But in the beginning, oh boy, every time I'd forget something and something would go wrong. So easy to
You
make
never
little.
really get over that.
Yeah, I imagine it'll still
I think
happen.
a couple months ago, I buried a 1/4 inch end mill through my wasteboard because I forgot to tighten the collet fully. It just, as it started moving along, the end mill started pulling out and going deeper and deeper and deeper. it you sort of just get over the fear of making mistakes because you know the stakes are so low.
Yep.
But you'll never be perfect.
I'm just glad I only break end mills that cost $1.20. I buy lots of cheap end mills because I know I'm going to do this.
Yeah, that's good.
10 packs.
Oh, so mind if I go on a tangent for just a second?
Go for it.
So speaking of things that were it's kind of bad mistakes, I did a bad job the other week. I tried to take footage of my inside of my laser cutter with my $1,000 plus camera, right? Put it in there, take it out. I thought I had everything right, and then I noticed a couple little spots in my video after that, and I thought for sure I'd just trashed my camera. Good news is it blew it out and it was all good.
It was just dust.
Yeah, just
Thank
dust.
goodness.
But anyway, so I don't know what the point of that was, but I guess listen to your podcast. You were influential in getting, I guess, a few more windows put into the machine, right? So you could video it from the outside a little bit more.
Yeah.
Is that right?
So there were a lot of things on my personal Nomad wish list that when I was handed the keys to be able to design the enclosure, I was able to implement. One of them was I pushed really strongly for plentiful lighting, just to make the inside pleasant to work in. We have a couple in the I call it the support cave. It's where a couple of our support staff work, and there's a Nomad in there
Sounds
because
inviting.
we have them do monthly projects, sort of like homework, so they stay current on it. But they're working in an office that's not the best lit, and when you're hunched over the machine, leaning into it, adjusting things, like you cast a shadow and it's really dark. And just the experience of working in like a enclosed box with no lighting is just it's not great. And then on camera, it's even worse. And then I also wanted some visibility from the side, just so you could at least line up the end mill with the front of material, because otherwise you're craning your neck in a tiny box that your head barely fits in, to check whether or not the end mill is level with the front of your block of wood or something. So I got to put in a lot of little quality of life improvements that I
Sure.
was personally a fan of.
Okay.
So yeah, that was nice.
So now that they have better lighting and stuff, they call it the support rec room or something a little bit more fun? Or
No,
is it-
the room itself is still pretty dark.
Okay.
But at the very least, I have described the new Nomad as looking as similar to if an Apple store were turned into a CNC machine, because it's nice and bright and inviting. The only thing is dust will stand out a little bit more, but as long as you just wipe down the windows with a soft microfiber cloth, you're good to go.
Am I
Sure.
right in remembering that the piece that's cut out for the window is that where you get that test piece that you send people with the kit
That
to make
is,
the tool holder?
When we were discussing what to do for your with the Nomad, because it's like a machine that comes ready to ship, we also include a tutorial for people to get started with, and it used to be done in a block of Wren shape. And when we made the change to the enclosure and we saw, hey, there's this big rectangular gap, what if we can repurpose that material and send it as like your starting stock for your tutorial project? And it actually works out really well because we ship more bamboo than we do the HDPE machines. So if you think for each machine you get 2 pieces of material, if you sell, I think if the ratio of bamboo machines to plastic machines is below a certain threshold, the bamboo cutouts will be enough for the bamboo machines and the plastic machines.
That's fantastic.
So yeah, it's a really good way to recycle material, and also Wren shape is not the cheapest thing, so it's nice to be able to repurpose an offcut and make it usable. And honestly, I think it looks pretty good as a starter project because bamboo ply just has that really unique look.
For anyone who doesn't know, Wren shape is a plastic that you get in kind of like blocks, sheet material kind of.
Yeah, I think it's like a machinable, very fine pore polyurethane foam, basically, that's hard. But because it's a synthetic material, it's a little more costly.
Hmm. Yeah, I wasn't sure myself, so I was like, well, I guess they know what they're talking about. But yeah, it's I've never actually cut bamboo in my CNC. I need to. I'm sure it's a pretty good material.
Because it's like, it's kind of like uh, Baltic Birch, I guess.
Okay.
It's not like your cheap run-of-the-mill like Home Depot plywood. You have almost no voids,
Hmm.
and I don't know how they process it, but the layers are usually like pretty well filled. It's all sanded and stuff, so it's a really nice quality plywood, fairly dense.
Okay.
It can make some nice things with it, but it's
So
not.
I was just thinking about it. It's like, you see bamboo in the wild and it's like, you cut it open or something like, how would you, it's not like you could put this on a sawmill. So it's definitely like a, not an MDF, but a
Engineered in some way.
engineered
Yeah,
wood, I guess.
you basically take strips of it and then you laminate them together.
Nice.
There's no way you could get like a bamboo like slab or something because it's hollow on the inside.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, that wouldn't really work, would it? Like,
I mean, you
so
could if you like resin filled it or something, but there's just so much empty space that the cross section of bamboo itself wouldn't cut it.
Yep.
yeah. Yeah. Maybe that's like a Peter Bound project or something.
That would be
I'm
right up his alley.
I'm excited about the Shapeoko Pro with the linear rails
Yeah,
and the bit setter. I'm a little
that was
jealous
real
of the bit
nice.
setter.
I don't want to say that V wheels are bad, because for 4 years I used a machine with
They
one.
get the job done
But
just
if you're
fine.
pushing a machine to its limits, you will find its limitations, and that is the first place where the limitations will show themselves. And so with linear rails, the machine is just so much more of a pleasure to use, and it does shockingly good work for the price that the machine is at. I think like the next highest tier up machine you go, like you're talking high 3,000s, 4,000 range, um, and there's a lot of value in the Pro.
I think so too. I was a little concerned at first when I saw the price, but then I started doing some and it comes with the upgraded Z-axis
Mhm.
and the
There's
bit setter.
there's a couple $100 of value just built into the fact of what we're including with the machine.
And I'm really jealous of that new table, that new aluminum.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It gives
it's
you the best of both worlds. Like you have MDF, you also have T-Track. I have been plotting out how I want to soup that up, and I think I'm going to machine some threaded insert holes into those MDF slats so I can bolt stuff down or use the T slots.
that's fantastic.
For the longest time, like I was kind of resistant to T slots because I like bolting things down in exactly the same spot. But after using the machine for a little bit, using like the side clamps that we have, it's actually really easy to just um, clamp down a like a wooden board 8 inches wide, 12 inches wide. You move the clamps a little bit and you lock them back in, and it's actually really convenient.
So how much, just for a little point of reference, how much is the Shapeoko Pro? What are we?
So your standard Shapeoko, the Shapeoko 3, will run you somewhere between like $1,000 and $2,000. The Shapeoko Pro would be between 2 to 3,000.
Okay, but obviously we're talking about a much more competent machine, I guess, or
Yeah. Um, if this is like your first CNC and you don't have like huge ambitions, you just want to make like little signs or like cut out little wooden earrings for Etsy or something, you don't really need the capability. But if this is a machine where you really want to push it, if this is going to be for like a small business or something, you need that extra level of reliability of, hey, I don't want to crack a V wheel, or I don't want like dust buildup to impede the way the machine rolls. Um, it's not just that the machine is stronger, it's also more reliable in the long run.
okay, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I feel like my CNC, I feel like I maybe overbought it a little bit. Like maybe I should have bought something, because it was very good, but it's just my needs maybe aren't quite what
What are you running, Jeremy? What's your CNC?
yeah. So I've got a Romaxx CNC. It's if you've even heard of those, they're I think it's a 3 foot by 2 foot bed, and it's got the screw
The
leads
lead
on it. So that
screws.
was, I guess, something that, correct or not, I was always very partial to that. I guess maybe coming from a manufacturing engineering background, it's just I guess you get some things in your head and you're like, I gotta have that, or
Yeah, there's no doubt
but
that it's better, but it's a question of is it necessary? Is it worth the extra?
right. And looking at it, it's a good machine, but again, was it what I needed? And I think that's something that people always have to kind of contemplate. Do they need this, or for that matter, do they need something smaller, like a Nomad that they can put on their desk, or do they need something bigger, kind of a little bit bigger area, or do they need something, or do they need to go for the $20,000 machine that they're going to be running 24 hours a day? I guess
Things where you could cut the knife handles out of a solid block of titanium. Those sort of
yeah,
machines. Those
yeah,
crazy.
that's pretty impressive. so yeah, I think it's all, maybe it's, I don't know. I guess when shopping around, it's like you should make sure you keep your eyes open and not just
Yeah, and I
get
think it's also
tunnel
like
vision.
it depends on what you want to do with the machine. If you have a business plan, I think any machine you can make work. Like any machine will be able to pay for itself if you have the right projects for it. And as a hobbyist, like the Romaxx, it looks like a capable, sturdy machine. Nothing wrong with it. Uh, but like if I had purchased that as my first machine, I would not have made the most of it because I started out with no knowledge of CNC, and the first things I made were like a couple little like keychain things, a bottle opener. They weren't things that were going to pay off a machine like this.
Right,
Um,
right.
so it
Yeah,
depends on where you're at in your maker journey, I guess.
no, I agree. And I guess that being said, that was not my first CNC. I actually had a Zen Toolworks. I don't know if you've heard of them, but it was okay, 7 inches by 12 inches, and man, I got a lot of use out of that for as small as it was. I
Mhm.
did a lot with that. It was I don't know. Anyway, it was a, for what it was, it suited my needs well, but it was
I
it was a lead screw. It was a screw machine, not a belt drive, and I think that maybe you just got that idea in my head and had to have it. But
I wound up talking myself into the biggest Shapeoko, the XXL, and I I don't want to say that I regret it, but I kind of wish I just went with the XL because the XXL is so deep. There's so much machine in front of you, and I think I've used it once. The
I
extra
really like
depth.
the XL form factor, just because like it fits on like a 2 foot deep workbench,
Yep.
and it doesn't jut out and take over your garage.
Yeah, it's such a big table. I had to put the XXL on. And I'm
Yeah,
sure
and
I'm going to be excited. Yeah, I talked myself into it because one of the things I thought would pay for the machine, I want to put new doors on all our cabinets in the kitchen, and I figured I could do something really cool. I could do
Mhm.
some kind of cool design or something. And I started measuring cabinets, and two of the doors are tall enough and wide enough that they wouldn't quite fit on the XL. So I
just
said, well,
won't quite fit.
yeah, it was only
That's the
two
thing.
inches.
It's
Yeah,
like it's always what it is. It,
yeah,
I bought this machine that's just gigantic compared to the one I had before, and it's like, well, if I just had like a little bit
just
more,
then I could do that
and
other project.
I guess that's, I don't know. Then you talk to people like, I was talking to somebody else I kind of know, and it's like, he has a gigantic machine. I think it's an 8x4, like a full size whatever. Like, well, you don't ever want a bigger machine with that, I guess. He's like, yeah, but then you want like the, another. There's always more features you can add on to it, and I guess
yeah,
I
it
guess that's what
never
makes life.
like we've had. I know we talked about this off camera before, but like we have had people asking like, "Hey, are you gonna make a 4x4 machine?" And then like in the forums,
That
people are
was
like,
me.
"Why are you gonna stop at 4x4? Why don't you go 5x5? I want to cut my Baltic Birch plywood, and it comes in 5x5." So there's no winning with these people. That
No.
someone always wants it bigger.
Yep.
Yep.
It's
That's
true.
true.
It really is.
But yeah, I mean, I guess that's life though. Otherwise, what fun would it be if there wasn't something new to think about? I mean, I guess the thing too. I always think like, in some ways, really, I should probably, well, I've always got to think about how big my garage is because I just don't want to take up all the space with my stuff. I got, storage, and in theory, I'd like to be able to park one car in it, but that's rarely happens. Um, so,
Yeah,
that's something to think about too. I mean, you can spend as much money as you want, and unless you're going to spend the money to put that extra car to expand your garage, and it's just not going to happen.
my dream has always been to have a machine that I could drop a full 4x8 sheet on, but I don't want to spend the money, and I don't want to take up that much room. I'm always tempted by the oh my goodness, it's jumped out of my head. The vertical, the inexpensive vertical
yeah,
CNC.
those are
Maslow.
The Maslow. Yeah, they just upgraded the Z-axis on the Maslow. They have a more expensive model.
it's the Maslow. It's like, well, you go one way, you get the lead screws versus
This is the opposite of
the belt.
way.
Is like the opposite accuracy wise.
Yeah, and I'm sure
I
the
guess.
accuracy on the Maslow is not nearly, but it takes up so little room compared to a real 4x8.
I've got a buddy with one, and it's like he did a project that I thought was really well suited to it for Halloween. He made some like big like person-sized cutouts of like monsters that he put up in his yard.
Oh, that's very
And
cool.
that's really great.
Yeah.
The thing you can't do with it is like a large 3D carving, so like a
Yeah.
topographic map, because the sled that rides on the face of the plywood needs something flat to sit on. And
I
so if
wa-
you start machining,
I watched a
pockets.
gentleman on YouTube carve a guitar with the new Z-axis. The curve of the fretboard, and yeah, you're right. There, you can't. You'll never get all the way up to 4x8 with that. He had to do fancy stuff to, for the sled to ride on.
Mhm.
Yeah,
But
you guys had to correct me if I'm way off base. Like maybe this is the guy's name, but I mean, Maslow isn't like the whole one's hierarchy of needs. So you buy the Maslow router, and well, it does what you need. It's tiny, and it pretty much gets you what you want. Or maybe the guy who invented it was named Maslow. I'm not entirely sure of that.
there could always be more than one guy. I know the guy you're talking about, though.
Yeah.
I
Or
always
maybe
figured
he's a
that
descendant of that guy.
it would be a good pairing to have a Maslow and a smaller Shapeoko in the same garage.
Oh, that'd be
my buddy
great.
had that.
Yeah, he's doing a good job. He's living my dream, I guess.
You cut out the wide stuff with the Maslow, and then you'd have like the Shapeoko or the Nomad. Even you could have like inserts,
Do the fine stuff.
precision inserts of your random stuff.
Yep, and I don't have a table saw. I could just use the Maslow as just cut material down. Just have the robot do it.
Yeah.
Just have the robot do it. That's
his
dream.
job.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. I guess. I will say, whenever I have a CNC router running and my 3D printer, I feel like and I'm doing something else, like independently, if I'm filing something, that's like, I've finally done. I'm doing what I need to do. This is
You're
everything.
living the robot army dream.
Yeah.
Robot Army
where
dream, yeah.
You have your machines doing your bidding. Do you have your 3D printer in the same space as your CNC?
I do.
Just out of curiosity, have you ever had any issues with dust, like just getting on the print bed and causing adhesion issues?
Well, I actually have an enclosed print bed, so that's
Okay.
Got no
Gotcha.
problems.
I was worried about that because my printer is like 5 feet from my Shapeoko, and I put up some doors and some side windows, but from the top it's still exposed. So
I can see where that would be a problem. I mean, it is enclosed, but honestly, I always mostly had the top cracked open so I could put a camera through there.
Mhm.
And even with that, I didn't have much of a problem. Although I don't know how much I ran the router. Yeah, I guess I ran it some, but yeah, it hasn't been a problem for me. I could see where it would be though. So,
okay, I'll just keep an eye on that.
Yeah, I can only imagine the dust in my garage is ridiculous. Especially with cutting the carbon fiber with the tine. I mean, I vacuum as best I can. There's still dust. And, wear a mask. Always wear a mask. That's important.
Yeah, that stuff is
It's
not fun.
nasty. It's nasty. I would be so upset if I was cutting it all the time instead of just
I guess it would be.
prototyping. Like manufacturing, I'd be terrified if I, cutting sheet after sheet after sheet.
Question for you, Pat.
Sure.
Which cutters did you end up using for machining carbon fiber?
I try a whole. I'm not sure I found a difference, but yeah, I've tried. I use 2 millimeter cutters because I have to cut M2 holes, so it's easier to just use and that's right about the right size. And I found some on Amazon, and I wish I could look these up. They're a single flute, but they have that, the fiberglass style cutting.
Like they've got the burr. Or
The burr,
diamond
yeah,
too?
it's all burr around them. Yeah, and I think I got 10 of them for $15 or something. I'm gonna check if you guys don't mind, because it should be in my order
Go for
history
it.
here.
I'm always curious what you end up as with, because I think I did my first cuts with just a regular 1/8" end mill, and for small scale stuff, it doesn't really matter.
Yep.
But I've heard long term, like those cutters will wear down because the carbon fiber is so abrasive.
It's so bad. Every cutter I've tried at least 4 different kinds, but I'm using all the cheap ones because I don't want to break. I'm more likely to break them than, and they're only $1 each.
Yeah.
But by the time I'll cut a whole quadcopter frame, and if I don't remember to change that cutter the next time, my screw holes are going to be too small. It does wear down. But now my friend who bought the 3018, and I don't even think we mentioned him on air. I think that was during the break. But he just ordered a bit, a Manitool carbon fiber cutting bit that has some kind of crazy coating that's supposed to last forever. We haven't tried it yet, and it's too big to cut any of the stuff I cut. It's closer to, I think it's a 1/4 inch. No, it can't be. It's a 1/4 inch shank, but a smaller. I think it's an 1/8 inch.
that would
mill.
probably
That's
make
too.
the most sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I
too
think I
big
can
for
follow.
me for the stuff I cut. But he wants to do these what do you call them? Scales for a knife. And none of the holes are smaller than the end mill that he picked. This was one of our quick. That's not focusing. But yeah, but this, oh my gosh, doing this big pocket on the side, so much dust came out of that. More than cutting a whole quadcopter frame just out of one scale. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't know. The carbon fiber cutting that just scares me. I'm very paranoid, as Pat knows from other.
Well, one of us has to be.
That's right. Yeah. So, as you say, you've got 2 eyes and 2 lungs as well. So
It's true. Just when you cut carbon fiber, just use the left one, and then when you come back in the house, use both, and you'll be fine.
none of us believe that. In fact, don't believe anything you hear here.
Yeah, we make mistakes all the time.
You're still listening, then thank you.
And I looked up those end mills, and I didn't actually say what it says. And it's really it's tungsten steel. It says it's HQ Master 10-pack end mill milling cutter router bits. It's a fantastic title. I'll send you a link. I'll put it in the description of the.
Yeah. Well, it's
show,
so well SEO titled. You could probably just look.
You
up
could Google
whatever.
that. Yeah, and I've tried ordering end mills from eBay was terrible. Because they had things I couldn't find anywhere else. And I ordered single flute end mills. I was so excited because, my DeWalt router spins so fast. The math for how fast I should be cutting, I can't cut that fast. And they sent me two flute end mills. I was so bummed out. It took like a month for them to get here.
I feel like we're having like true machinist confessions here or something. Like we're.
That's usually how machinist podcasts turn out. It turns into like a therapy session for all parties involved.
I could believe this. I totally believe this.
I guess we've been talking for a while. You guys want to tell me what you guys are working on these days, and then we'll maybe wrap it up. Does that sound good to you guys?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Who's starting?
Right. Well, why don't you, Winston? You're our guest today. So what's your big project you're working on?
So I've got 2 projects that I'm cooking up right now. One of them is a small 3D printing project. So I've been trying to, sort of as a New Year's resolution, improve the organization of my shop. And late last year, I bought like half a dozen DeWalt organizer cases, and the removable bins that are in these cases are a little too large to like fit the assorted hardware that I want to put in here. There's
Right.
10 bins per case, and that's not enough to capture the diversity of objects I want to arrange there. So I'm designing and printing out some little subdividers that will drop in to these bins, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks I'll have my shop will magically transform into this pristine environment, but it likely won't. But I'll
Nice.
feel better about it. So that's my
Nice.
small project. And the big project is a more long-term thing where I've got a buddy who's really big into camping. He's got a trailer and he likes to go off-road and stuff. And he wanted to build a little pull-out kitchen on drawers for his trailer. So you can just pull up to a campsite, pop open the door, and pull out the hatch, and out comes a little camping stove, a little cutting area, some storage, some cabinets for your pantry. And some of it will likely have to fabricate by hand with your traditional power tools. But for the parts that I can design around, like the stove, I want to try and CNC some parts and ship them to him. And then at some point, once we're all free to travel around, we can go camping together.
Nice.
That's fantastic. You know, Jeremy was making faces while you're talking about that. The former co-host of this podcast, his business is literally making drawer slides for RVs. That's his thing.
But he calls them caravans, so I don't know if that's different. No, yeah, that's his thing. He pretty neat idea, I guess. Anyway,
Yeah.
his name is Max Maker. He'll never tell us what his business name is, but you know. Anyway, so yeah, hopefully that'll I'm sure that'll be a fun pursuit. Yeah, that's funny. I do I have a bunch of Harbor Freight boxes, which are I guess are probably like DeWalt kind as well. I don't know. Anyway,
The clear
anyway,
top cases, right? With the little...
yeah, they like pop open. They have like removable little dividers in it. So yeah, that's great stuff. I've actually printed some dividers for mine too. So I think that's a good little project. As far as what I've been working on, I've got. It's funny. I guess I've been on kind of a printed circuit board kick lately. I've got a couple things that I'll, I guess, reveal before too. Well, but whatever. One of them is a like a camera trigger, with a passive infrared sensor. So you hook it up to a Canon camera, and hopefully it'll just take pictures of wildlife or whatever else. But kind of prototyping that. So it's basically like you plug in one of these little PIR sensors, sends a signal to the camera, takes a flash, and hopefully you see a deer or osprey or whatever else happens right in front of it. So, but yeah. What about you, Pat? Anything interesting?
I've been kind of busy with other things. I haven't been starting any new projects, but very different than what you guys are doing. I ordered some used Infiniband hardware off of eBay, some 40 gigabit Infiniband network hard. I have 20 gigabit now, but it's so cheap. This old used enterprise hardware just sells so cheap. It's costing me about $70 to move up to 40 gigabit.
Wait. So you say what do you mean by that? I guess.
Well, I know what you're going to get at, Jeremy. Like, your laptop has an Ethernet port, and it's probably a 1 gigabit port. And what I've bought for my desktop and my little VM server here, what's currently in there are 20 gigabit. It's something called Infiniband. It used to be used for, compute clusters used to use it. You could basically use... I'm not using it this way, but you can basically use memory on another machine as if it's local memory on this machine. So all the machines in your machine learning, whatever, they didn't call it machine learning back then, could all access memory on each other's hosts at very high speeds with very low latency. I'm just running IP over it. But my current cards are old enough that the PCIe slots that I have in my computers here are limiting it to about 8 gigabit, and I'm hoping the new ones will double that. Okay. If I've done my math right.
That's kind of insane, but that's awesome.
It is.
I approve.
It makes my NAS feel like local discs. I mean, they're just sitting here. It's only a 1 meter cable between. It's not like it's in another room, but
Well, that sounds awesome. So when you say that, you're not getting 40 gigabits of speed from the internet. You're getting it from
No, just the
hard
two
drive.
machines that are right next to each other. No internet involved. My internet's only 200 megabit. It's not nearly that fast.
I guess the whole concept. I just picture like somebody, like some sci-fi movie where somebody captures everybody's brains and he can think with their brain. I guess we're going
Earth
off
to
on
Jeremy. You're doing the Earth to Jeremy. Earth to Pat.
I've got all these people that I've just captured their brains and they're just giving me their intelligence.
One day, when Pat needs to transfer his consciousness, he'll have the perfect hardware to do it.
Yep, I'll have all the bandwidth I need.
Oh,
Well, it's so much cheap. You could buy 10 gigabit over Cat 6 cable hardware, but they're like 100 or 150, maybe $200 per card, and then the switches to do it are. I don't need a switch though. I'm just plugging the two machines into each other. But these Infiniband cards are $30 each, and it's 40 gigabit instead of 10. It's.
What kind of cable do you need to connect them?
An SFP plus a QSFP plus. I think that's quad SFP plus cable. I've got one. It's wait do you see this here? It's this. They've got this end. Geez, it's focusing on my hand. With a, it's got a little printed circuit board looking end on it, and yeah, it's only this little short. This was an $18 cable. This is different than my 20 gigabit cable. That's a CX4 cable. And the CX4 cable's interesting. I looked those up. You could run something like 10 or 15 gigabit Ethernet connections over them somehow. I don't know what kind of hardware you use for that it's 10 different gigabit ports connected for cross-connected. I don't know who did that. That seems really weird.
That looked way more sci-fi than I was expecting, and that is delightful.
Isn't that cool? And they make these that's copper. They make them they have the same looking ends, but then you run fiber between it. If you needed to go more than 2 meters, I think you have to go fiber for this.
Well, good for you.
I'm excited.
So
I'm going to be real disappointed if I find out that I'm remembering one of these PCIe slots wrong and I won't actually get any speed increase whatsoever. I don't mind spending them. It was only $70 to do the whole thing, but I'm going to be bummed out that I tear these machines apart, put new cards in them, climb on the floor, and then get 8 gigabit again. But it'll be okay.
So Winston, where can people find you?
Usual social media places, Twitter, Instagram are where I'm most active. At Winston Makes, one word. And if you just search me on YouTube, Winston Moy, you'll find me there. And you can also find a lot of my content for Carbide 3D on the Carbide 3D YouTube channel.
Nice.
I'm going to tell you, I was really confused yesterday or the day before. I accidentally typed Winston Moy without the S. And he's out there. He has 2 subscribers on YouTube. I typed it.
I'm wondering if I should
where
maybe just squat on that website URL just to take it just in case and redirect some lost followers.
I'm sure he was glad when you subscribed to him, Pat.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Pat, where can we find you?
Well, most people know me from my blog, but they find me just Googling things. I don't think I'm not exactly a personality. But I have a YouTube channel. I'm on Twitter I tweet things all the time, all kinds of nonsense.
Yeah, and patshead.com is your website.
It is, and it used to just be an animated GIF of my head, like Bill Nye spinning around. But that's not even there anymore.
Expectations are real low for that one, but
I hope so.
Better. It's better than that at this point, right?
Yes, it's better. There's all sorts there's hundreds of thousands of words up there these days. It's amazing.
You can read each and every one if you so desire.
And how about you, Jeremy? Are you on the internet too?
Yeah, I'm on the internet. Usually I go by Jeremy S. Cook, so you can find that on YouTube. I think I do Jeremy Cook DIY is what I put on YouTube now, and then at Jeremy S. Cook on Twitter. And
branding is hard.
Well, you're right about that. So, but yeah, well, thanks for coming on, Winston. And
yeah, this has been fun.
Had a lot of fun.